You know, it's no secret that the bad economy for the last 5 years has been detrimental to people working. However, is there a connection between people not being able to find a job and going on Social Security disability? On this program, we'll examine the increase in those going on disability, look at the possible causes of that, see if the incentives are wrong, and try to look into the future about what the workforce will look like in 2018. Let's start by meeting the panel. First on my right is Carl Weisbrod. He's a lawyer and nationally respected authority on Social Security disability law. He's represented thousands of disabled individuals and is a past president of the National Organization of Social Security Claimants Representatives. Carl, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Going to be interested in your thoughts, obviously, about this issue because you've been there, done that, as we say, and so thank you for being here. Pam Villarreal is the National Center for Policy Analysis, expert on retirement, Social Security, economic growth, and tax issues. She writes on such topics as Medicare, tax cuts, and Social Security disability, and she has 2 degrees in economics from the University of Texas at Dallas. Pam, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Pam, what's the issue here? Why are we talking about this, and what's the cause of whatever problem you see?
Well, of course, disability is part of the Social Security entitlement programs, which we all agree are in trouble. The problem with disability is the increasing cost. Last year, disability paid about $132 billion in claims. Disability is actually increasing faster than the Social Security payouts. So it's in sore need of reform. I mean, we have a labor force that's growing at less than 1% a year, yet the number of claimants who are receiving payments each year is growing at about 5%. So it's no secret that the labor force is shrinking. I think right now it's at about 63%, which is at an all-time low since about 1981. So it makes me wonder if there's a connection between the growing disability claims and the growing payouts and the fact that we have a labor force that is not being replaced by people going on disability. It's in major need of reform along with other entitlement programs as well.
Okay, great. Carl?
Dennis, the big underlying problem with Social Security disability is the same underlying problem with the Social Security retirement program, which namely is us, the baby boom generation, growing older, and the trajectory of insolvency for the disability program is no different than the trajectory of insolvency for the retirement program. It hits earlier because disability hits when people are in their 50s, and then the retirement crunch will be later when people are in their 60s.
All right, so you're saying that it's basically a demographic problem. As we get older, more people are reaching 50, not to mention 65, as the baby boomers are getting to. And so that's a real issue, Pam. People are getting older, so what the heck? What do you want to do, keep people from getting older?
It is true. Part of the growth in disability can be attributed to the change in the demographics. Studies indicate that for about a 1% increase in the 50 to 64-year-old age group relative to the 25 to 54-year-olds, there is about a 2% increase in disability claims. But the problem we have here is that disability beneficiaries are increasing at about 5% a year. So the increase in disability claims cannot be completely explained by age. One thing you have to look at is how the disability system evolved. Back in the 80s, a lot of changes were made to the disability system that made it much easier for people to claim disability for certain things. 2 of the largest growing sectors of disability as far as diagnoses were, say, things like chronic back pain, and then also mental disorders. Now, most mental disorders you would think of as things that are fairly quantifiable, like schizophrenia, but we're looking at a growth in mental disorders that are things as treatable as anxiety and depression.
Well, let's look at graphic number 1. I think you have a graphic on that, Pam. So if we could pull up graphic number 1, we'll see what this looks like. And I think if you look at that by diagnosis, a little hard to read at home, but I believe that the mental disorders are on the left, and this is from 1981 to 2010. So the blue is 81, and then the second part there is other problems, which I can't read, tumors basically, right? That's
Right.
neoplasm, tumors in the middle. And then diseases of the blood, circulatory, respiratory on the right-hand side is actually shrunk. But if I'm reading this right, Pam, mental disorders has gone from about 10% to 32% of the claimants in the last 30 years. Is that true?
That's correct. And it kind of correlates with the fact that the disability situation, the diagnoses have actually been more relaxed, so that people who have things that are beyond your traditional mental disorders can file claims. And as you notice too, neoplasms, the tumors, have fallen, and that's because we have better cancer treatments. So in some ways, the the healthcare treatments for typical disabilities have gotten better, but then you have these disabilities such as chronic pain and the depression, the anxiety, that are very treatable, but they're not as easy to measure.
Interesting. Carl, your thoughts about that?
Well, Pam's right that the aging of the population is not the sole explanation for the significant increase in the disability rolls, the disability insurance program. In fact, I think the statistic is that the number of people on disability has tripled since 1980. It's doubled since 1995. Only part of that's explained by aging of the population, but there are other demographic factors that are extremely important. One is the increased participation of women in the workforce. In order to qualify for Social Security disability, you have to have worked a quarter, you have to have insured status that it's stricter than the retirement insured status. You have to have worked basically a quarter of your adult life and 5 of the preceding 10 years before you became disabled. Now, in the 1970s and 1980s, there was an influx of more women in the workforce, and it's now that women are accumulating the quarters of coverage to be eligible for disability benefits. As recently as 1990, the ratio of disabled men to disabled women under this program was 2 to 1. It's now 1 to 1. So you can't underestimate the demographic impact of women in the workplace. A third factor, important demographic factor, is well, it's not a demographic factor, but the increase in the retirement age. So the retirement age has been increased from 65 to 66. And people who are 65 who would have been in the retirement, on full retirement, are now account for 5% of the total disability rolls.
Okay. So, Pam, you were sort of nodding your head when you were talking about the women issue. Is that part of the issue?
Actually, that is correct. Now there are about 53% of men who constitute the disabled population, and then the other nearly half is women. However, I don't discount the fact that the requirements have been relaxed, especially when you look at people under the age of 50. Half of them under the age of 50 are claiming a mental disorder. Now, that either tells me that we have a lot more people who are having mental issues, or because of this, this relaxed requirement on disability, we have more people that can claim that. So there are some demographic changes going on here, but there's also changes that have evolved under the disability law.
Okay, so you're a lawyer. Would you agree that there were some changes, that it was made easier, or just what was changed?
Well, let's talk about the mental impairment, since that's one of the chief issues that Pam raises. In 1984, that was the last legislation for the last Disability Benefit Reform Act, DBRA. And that was passed under the Reagan administration. And it did substantially alter the way mental impairments were considered. But you should know that that law was passed unanimously by a Republican Senate and signed by a Republican president, as well as the Democratic Congress, and it followed an era of what everybody agreed were horrible abuses against people with mental impairments, unrealistic consideration of the mental aspect of disability.
Because it's a harder thing to talk about that. Is if somebody lost an arm or a leg or something, you can see that, right?
Exactly. And the other thing is that back then, as recently as 20 years ago, you saw a lot more people who experienced or felt great stigma about talking about their mental impairments. And so there was, for that reason, the diagnoses of mental impairments, including, now she says depression is something highly treatable and shouldn't be the subject of a long-term type of problem, but that's just not true for a lot of people, and it also has an interactive effect with the physical impairments. People who are depressed tend to focus more on their physical impairments and have more difficulty coping with their physical impairments.
It can add to itself. Now, for that person watching this program, Carl, and who may not know, I've been told by some people who have been through this process that the process is not just like you just fill out a card and send it in and say, "Hi, hey, I'm disabled." It's a tough process sometimes to get through. Is that true or not? And tell us how it works just briefly.
Okay. Well, first of all, the criteria for disability that are written into the law are extremely strict. I mean, they're the strictest of any disability determination process that most people are familiar with, much more strict than private long-term disability policies. You have to have, first of all, you have to have worked enough to be covered. A lot of claims are dismissed for that reason. You have to have a severe medically determinable mental or physical impairment that's expected to result in death or will last at least 12 months. So medically determinable impairment, that means that the medical records have to show some serious
So if you're
ailment.
representing somebody, they've got to come to you with a doctor's diagnosis or a doctor's, recommendation that they go on disability, or how does that work?
Well, 90% of the disability determination is based on the medical evidence, what's in the medical records, not just what the doctor says. I mean, I have people come to me with a statement from their doctor that says this man's totally disabled. Well, the Social Security Administration rejects that type of statement out of hand. They look behind that because the law requires them to look for laboratory tests, clinical findings that substantiate the severity of the impairment.
Okay, so Pam, one of the things that you talk about is there may be disincentives, that is, people can go on because of other reasons, or even potential fraud. How important are those things?
Actually, of course, with any government program, you're going to have fraud. In the Medicare program, it's estimated that about 10% of the costs are due to fraud, so I imagine that you're probably going to have something similar in the disability program. Actually, a doctor had called me one time and told me that probably about 90% of the people who went to him to get a disability exam truly were not disabled. Only 10% of them he felt were truly disabled.
Let me stop you there. 90% were not, but they went to him to get that. Now then, would it be fair to say, Carl, that the 90% didn't ever show up? Only the 10% who he agreed got through, at least the people who went to that doctor. Carl, do you think it might say doctor shop to find somebody who would agree with this, or is that not a problem?
Well, like I say, it's not going to be the doctor's word. A doctor certifying this man is disabled is not going to come close to getting you approved under this program.
Okay, so Pam, that just because the doctor says so even does not make it so. Even the 10% are not going to all get approved, right? So what would you say about that?
Well, and one thing the law does allow now is that the doctor has to take into consideration how the claimant is feeling. So if the claimant is claiming they have chronic pain, even if it's not quantifiable, you know, it has to be considered in the determination. But as I said before, obviously there's going to be some fraud. And, you know, when you look at a private insurance company that provides disability insurance, you often see that they have a division that's dedicated to just looking for fraud because it's common. If it's common in the private sector, it's going to be even more so in the public sector.
Okay, now, Carl, I remember a movie. This shows my age, and I apologize, but I remember a movie. It seems like it was Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau years ago where Jack Lemmon or one of them was feigning a neck problem. They had the brace on. You know the movie I'm talking about? I mean, so does
Dennis, I'm not old enough to remember.
Well, you're
Jack
right.
Lemmon.
Oh, you may have seen the movie anyway. That's the good news. Okay. I tell the jokes on this program, Carl. Don't forget that. Now, so look, does the Social Security Administration actually look into this after they're approved? I mean, do they do any after effect thing, or once they get on disability, are they on disability forever?
Well, you've asked a couple of questions, but the Social Security Administration absolutely does look for fraud, and it has something called the Office of Inspector General, and the Office of Inspector General does investigations from time to time. When I review a file, sometimes I'll find that there's been some suspicion that my client was malingering, or and the Inspector General was called in, and they had investigators go out there and do these investigations. Now, I should say that I should point out, just as far as get away from anecdotal evidence and talk about what the actual statistical evidence is. The chief actuary for the Social Security Administration says that the accuracy rate for Social Security disability determinations is about 97.5%. So it's a pretty good record. I think that you don't just have fraud and abuse in government-run programs. You have fraud and abuse in
private programs,
in private disability insurance programs as well.
Exactly. Okay, I want to look at your graphic number 5, which has to do with geography, which I found an interesting graphic, Carl. Talk to us about that and what the really dark blue states are and lighter blue states are versus the other states.
Well, the dark blue states are the states with the highest incidence per capita of disability. And I was limited in the number of slides I could have, but there's another slide that looks almost identical that shows that factors in the demographic factors of poor education, lower educational attainment, and in the case of Maine, the higher age of the workforce.
Okay, and then you've got there Kentucky and West Virginia, which have some of those issues. Now, Pam, go ahead and respond. I know you're interested.
Okay,
in that.
well, let's assume that Social Security disability has an accuracy rate of 97%. There's a lot of disincentives in the system that are not in a private system. The chances of somebody actually returning to work over a 10-year period are about 1 to 2%. And Social Security is supposed to do follow-up exams. If you have what they believe to be a temporary disability, then they're supposed to validate and check on you after, say, I think it's anywhere from 6 to 18 months. If you have a more long-term disability, you might have to have it validated, say, after 3 years or after 7 years. One of the problems is they don't often follow up on that. So you have people that are on the dole. They may be getting better, but they're still continuing to receive
Right.
benefits.
And we hope they're getting better. But Carl, one of the things, and Pam, you don't know this, but Bill Hammond, who runs the Texas Association of Business here in Texas, said, this has been 10 years ago, talking about workers going on disability, virtually never go back to work, as you were saying, 1 or 2%. Now, that sounds pretty strange to me. Reforms, Pam, in just the time we have left, what would you recommend be done to make it either more fair to the people who need it, and then less gaming of the system?
Well, one thing we need to do is we need to kind of eliminate this, you're either disabled or you're not. A lot of private policies have where you can get partial disability. So perhaps allow people who do have some type of disability that doesn't completely limit them from working to perhaps get a 50% disability, and then they can still earn money and not lose benefits. That's one of the incentives built into the system, is when you start working and earning over a certain amount of money, you start losing benefits. Also, we're on what's called a pay-as-you-go system. So our payroll taxes right now are going to pay for today's disabled people. What we need to do is have a more personalized system where we have pre-funded accounts like they actually do in Chile, so that we don't have this pay-as-you-go system that's actually, increasing the deficit. We need to have more of a system that's tied with the money we put into the account that is tied to, to our earnings. Chile has done a system like that, and they've actually decreased their disability rates, and people who are disabled but can still do some work are allowed to do so without being penalized.
Interesting. Now, Carl, you have graphic number 7, which you brought with us too, and it's talking about whether they could continue to work. Let's look at that graphic right now, and it's hard to read from every place, but tell us about what that means.
Well, again, let's go back to the demographics. You want to know, could these people be working? 70% of them are over 50 years of age. 30% are over 60 years of age. 5% are 65 years of age. All of them have some debilitating condition. A quarter of them lack high school education. Only 10% of them graduated college. They're able, under the disability program, people are able to work part-time to supplement their income. And you mentioned, she keeps talking about incentives. It's worth knowing that what are we talking about here? The average monthly disability benefit under this program is $1,100 a month. That's $13,000 a year. The poverty level is $11,000 a year. For the average disability recipient, there's a 50% decline. The disability benefits are 50%, only replace 50% of pre-disability income. These are people who are taking a big hit in their cost of living.
By doing so now, Pam, is that true that it's a big hit, or after taxes and everything else, is there really much difference?
Well, there's no doubt that being on disability doesn't make you wealthy, but the threshold for earning while you're on disability is about $1,050 a month. So there is absolutely no incentive to do even a little work to earn more than that for fear of losing your benefits. Basically, your effective marginal tax rate is 100%. When you look at the Chilean system, he said that there's about a 50% replacement rate. The Chilean system actually guarantees a 70% replacement rate. So not only are these people able to work and to draw on their own accounts, but they're also actually earning a little bit more money even when they are disabled.
Now, Carl, would something like that make sense to you from a public policy standpoint?
Which country?
Chile.
Look, I don't know what's going on.
Chile is the folks out there.
I don't know what's going on in Chile, but I would caution against. I would caution against any radical changes in this program without careful study. I mean, we know what it's like to try to change from a political standpoint, try to change the Social Security retirement program. And I would suggest that there's every reason to be at least as cautious in making significant changes in the disability program as there is for retirement, because these are people who cannot take or are less capable of taking care of themselves than retirees.
It's not just that they're old like some of us. They have some other issues as well. Okay, have about a minute left. Pam, give us any thoughts that you haven't shared with us so far or reinforce what you've said so far.
Well, I'd just like to say the disability system is not going to do too much for anybody if it's running out of money. Just like Social Security, there is no trust fund. It's being spent on other programs. We really need to look at reform, not just for the solvency of the country, but we need to look at reform for people who are truly disabled, because this system is running out of money.
Okay, Carl, you have the last word.
I agree. There have to be some fix to extend the life of Social Security, retirement and disability, and I would only maintain that they should be considered together and not focused just on the disability program. There are many reasons why the two the fix needs to be applied to both of them.
I appreciate both of you being here. Thank you so much.
Well,
and lots of agreement, which is even better. Whether you believe that some people are gaming the system or that there's merely an increase in those people who are legitimately disabled and those who are older, the point is that incentives matter. The further point is that in a world of overwhelming federal debt and deficits, the ability, as Pam said, for those who are legitimately disabled or not, is in danger. Now, there's a subject that we hope you'll follow. We also hope that you'll look at our website at McCuistionTV.com and follow us on Twitter. Thanks for inviting us in to talk about things that really matter to a lot of people, and they really do care. Thank you.